Hello everybody, my name is Julius Kamal. I'm a software engineer and the tech lead for our spatial audio efforts for virtual reality here at Google. First of all, thank you so much for coming. It's really great to see so much interest for spatial audio here at Google I/O this year. And we are extremely excited to share with you our spatial audio rendering engine, which is included in the Google VR SDK, Google's platform for high-quality mobile VR. Very early on in the project, we made an experiment where we tried to simulate all aspects of how humans perceive sound. And these results have been so incredible that this immediately became a serious project. And today, we have made available a best-in-class spatial audio rendering solution for mobile devices with zero compromise in quality. This means now you can get a truly realistic spatial audio experience on a mobile device for free. And we know you're going to love this. So today, together with my colleagues, Ian, Alper, and Adam, we'll share a lot of background information about the technology that we created for you. Specifically, you will learn about the importance of high-quality spatial audio for virtual reality. We will explain how spatial audio works in our real world and how we can simulate that in our SDK. And parts may sound complex, but we will show you how easy it is to add spatial audio to your VR experiences. We will show you the very few steps needed to create really compelling spatial audio experiences. And we will share user design recommendations, which will help you to optimize your audio assets and create amazing experiences. So you hear a lot of cool stuff today. Spatial audio has a long history. Already stereo recordings provided a first sense of spaciousness since we are able to pan a phantom source between two speakers. And over the years, more and more speakers were added. Here we see a 5.1 setup, which allows you to horizontally pan a source. 7.1 provides more elevation. And now we are in the VR era, where technologies like ambisonics provide true audio immersion. We are able to playback sound sources from all directions, and we are able to simulate real-world acoustics in VR. And in VR, spatial audio is vital. If someone calls your name, you know immediately where to look. If you drop a coin, you know immediately the direction it rolled. Why? Because we hear directionally. We perceive the location of sound sources in our environment. So how does that apply to VR? In VR, we put the user into the middle of the action, and he might not even know where to look. Spatial audio provides a powerful tool to control user attention. By providing spatial audio cues from the direction of interest, we can guide a user through a VR experience. But it's not only a powerful content creation tool. The illusion of being in a different world immediately breaks as soon as there's a mismatch between our senses. And particularly the lack of spatial audio immediately breaks in VR immersion. So in this context, it's really important that spatial audio deserves a lot of attention from content creators like you. So in order to bring spatial audio to VR, the first question we should ask ourselves is, how does spatial audio work in our real world? Let's take a look at what happens when a sound wave propagates through a room and hits a human head. The first thing we notice here is that there's a time difference between the sound wave hitting the left and the right ear. And that time difference depends on the location of your sound source. The more the sound source is to the left or to the right, the larger that time difference is. So just using that time difference doesn't work. At the moment where we consider high frequencies, the size of the sound waves traveling through the air becomes smaller than the human head. So at approximately 1.5 kilohertz, this is exactly what is happening. At this moment, the human brain isn't able to differentiate anymore if it's the same sound wave hitting both ears or if we have two separate sound waves. So just using the time difference alone doesn't help. We need more. And in fact, the human brain also uses the level differences. The human head creates an acoustic shadow which damps high frequencies. And at approximately 1.5 kilohertz and above, we use these level differences to localize sound objects as well. So we heard of time differences and level differences, but unfortunately that's not enough. consider a sound source in your front or in your back. It would have the same time and level differences. What about a sound source at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock? Again, that would have the same time and level differences. In fact, you can draw a set of cones on the sides of each ear, and every sound source on the surface of each cone would have the same time and level differences. So how do we humans deal with that? We do two things. First, we move our head. We move our head all the time, and I'm sure you have seen dogs doing the same thing. They have a very precise spatial audio perception system. So what happens when we move our head? This is illustrated here. On the left side, we see a sound source in our front and in our back, and it results in the same time and level differences. At the moment where we move our head, these level and time differences change in exact opposite direction, which helps us to resolve these ambiguities in the horizontal domain. But what about the vertical domain? Here we use those guys, our outer ears. They act as a special pair of filters that are highly unique to us. They create something like an acoustic fingerprint to everything we hear. And when sound waves arrive at our ears, they bounce off inside the so-called pinna in different ways depending on the direction of the sound wave. And this way, our outer ears act as a filter which depends on the direction of the sound waves arriving. And again, by moving our head and listening for the changes in spectral frequencies, we can localize objects in 3D. So, but let's not be selfish. Spatial audio is not only about us. It's also about the environment. Sound waves do not only bounce off our ears, they bounce off everything that surrounds us. First comes the direct sound. Then we hear so-called early reflections, which are the first strong reflections from objects probably nearby that are still strong enough to perceive their direction. And this builds up more and more until we hear the reverb of a room. And that reverb tells us a lot of important information. For instance, the size of the room or the materials used. For instance, a stone room sounds different than a room made out of wood. So you see, we perceive a lot of important information here. So now you heard about spatial audio perception and the importance of real-world acoustic modeling. I'd like to invite now Ian to explain how we simulate all of this in VR on a mobile device. Yeah.
Hello everyone, Dave. My name is Ian, and I'm a software engineer here at Google. And I work on some of the DSP algorithms that underlie how our spatial audio technology works. And today I'm going to bring you through how it is we spatialize sounds in virtual reality. Now we're all familiar with the concept of loudspeakers. Well, with an array of loudspeakers positioned around a listener's head, we can begin to play back audio through the individual loudspeakers in such a way that we could recreate the sound wave as if it came from an object anywhere in space around. So in this way, we could create a synthetic sound source anywhere around the listener. We use a method that's known as ambisonics in order to calculate what the signal played through each loudspeaker needs to be in order to recreate these sound waves. And we can use this not just for the direct sound coming from the source to the listener, but also for reflections coming from the walls. In this way, we could also recreate an artificial environment around the listener's head. And with more and more loudspeakers, we can move into 3 dimensions and create an array of loudspeakers around the listener. In that manner, you could play back sounds from any direction, reflections from walls, ceiling, or floor. And with more and more loudspeakers, you can have a greater fidelity in the sound waves you're recreating. But all of that still leaves you with one foot in the real world, so to speak. Because sure, you have a synthetic sound source, synthetic reflections from surfaces that aren't really there, but the loudspeakers themselves are still very much rooted in the real world. And the manner in which we get around this is what's known as binaural rendering. Now, Julius spoke about the cues that humans use in order to localize sounds, whether they be the time of arrival differences, the level differences, or the changes in the frequencies as the sound moves up and down. All of this information can be captured in a special set of audio filters, and these are the HRTFs you might have heard about. Well, when sound is played through a HRTF and then over headphones, it gives the listener the impression, it fools your auditory system into thinking that a sound source is somewhere in space. Well, at Google, we use this to create what we call virtual loudspeakers. And we can have a set of these audio filters for each loudspeaker around you in the large spherical array. So in a very real sense, when you're using Google VR, you have a virtual spherical array of loudspeakers around you at all times. We move our heads constantly. And this is conscious and subconscious. In fact, your head is always in motion, whether you're aware of it or not. But when you're wearing a HMD, this motion is tracked. And we use that data in order to rotate all of our sound sources and all of the reflections in the opposite direction to how you're turning your head. And we do this so that when you turn, sources don't track with you, but instead they stay locked in space. And you can use all of the cues that Julia spoke about in the real world in order to localize sound sources in virtual environments that you create. Now, you might naively think that with this finite set of loudspeakers around the listener's head, there would be a finite number of positions at which we could spatialize audio. But that is not the case. In fact, to explain this, all you need to think about are the old-fashioned stereo loudspeakers you probably have at home. Now, one can pan a source between a pair of loudspeakers and create a phantom source anywhere in between. But we do something very similar, if a little more complex, using ambisonics to pan sound sources anywhere between the virtual loudspeakers in our spherical array. In this way, you can have an audio source anywhere around your head and immerse a listener in a sphere of sound. And there's also a computational advantage offered here. Because even as we add in more and more sound sources and more reflections, the number of virtual loudspeakers that we're rendering this over stays constant. Julia's touched upon the concept of sound propagation, of a sound wave propagating from a source to a listener. Well, a very nice analogy for this is the way ripples spread from a source, a drop falling, on a pond outwards. As they spread outwards, they diminish in amplitude because the energy is spread over a larger and larger area. Well, this is replicated in VR in order to give a third dimension to the spatial audio we're listening to. As you move towards or away from sources, or they do the same for you, we model the way in which the amplitudes change in the real world in order to give you this sense of distance in your VR environments. Take, for example, occlusion. We use low-pass filtering in order to model occlusion, because in the real world, when a sound wave emanates from a source and strikes an object between you and the source, the higher frequencies are reflected backwards off the source, while lower frequencies can diffract around and still reach the listener's ears. And by using smoothly changing low-pass filters, we can accurately recreate the sounds of real occlusions in the virtual environments you're creating. Now, so far, I've talked about the direct sound, the sound coming directly from the source to the listener. But that is not where the story ends. The next thing to arrive at your ears are what are called the early reflections. And we spatialize the early reflections. We calculate the number of bounces they make off surfaces, the eventual direction they're arriving in from, the time and distance they've taken to travel there. And we use this to create a new set of audio sources, spatialized on our virtual array of loudspeakers all around the listener. But we do this just for the first few early reflections. For the next few million reflections, we do something else, because not only would it be computationally expensive, but it is perceptually not necessary. In fact, we can do better than that. If you think about what happens to sound waves as they bounce around inside a room, over time, the arrivals at your ears of the different waves builds up and up and up. And you get something that is very much like white noise, overlapping reflections distorted by the bounces that are arriving. Well, this white noise-like portion is what's generally referred to as the reverb of a room. And in the Google VR audio system, we have a powerful reverb engine built in. It reacts in real time to changes in the size and shape of the environment, to changes in the acoustic properties of the surface materials you have. It provides a different reverb to each of the listener's ears. And this gives you a very strong sense of spaciousness, of a sound being without your head. We provide a reverb that decays differently at different frequencies. Because in the real world, if I clap my hand, the sound waves dissipate at different rates depending on frequency. We model all of this so that we give the most realistic sounding reverb we possibly can. And all of it is done reacting in real time on mobile. Now, shown here is a highly simplified audio graph, but it captures many of the key components in our system. We take in mono audio, we spatialize it over our virtual loudspeaker array, we calculate the early reflections, where they arrive in from, and we provide an advanced reverb system. And all of this is rendered binaurally over a pair of headphones, reacting in real time to listeners' head movements, changes in the source's position, and changes in the environment's size, shape, and surface materials. And I haven't even had time to mention all of the different effects we're applying. There are other things like complex directivity patterns for sources emission, the ability to play back ambisonic sound fields. And in order to see it all, what you're going to have to do is just go and download the Google VR SDK and start playing around with it yourselves. And in order now to bring you through our SDKs and APIs, I'd like to welcome onto the stage my friend and colleague, Alper Gungerbuscher.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Alper. I'm a software engineer in the Google VR audio team, focusing on the development of our SDKs. So now we've covered how our spatial audio system works. Let's take a look at how you can use it to easily enable spatial audio in your virtual reality experiences. So, as part of the Google VR SDK, we target 3 main platforms: Android, iOS, and Unity. With our native SDKs for Android and iOS, we provide you all the tools you need to add spatial audio to any apps or games you wish to create with a simple few function calls. So, to give you an idea how this looks like, let's take a look at our Android SDK. Here, you see a short code snippet written in Java. It demonstrates all the steps required for you to play back specialized audio in your Android app. So we can break this down into 4 simple steps. First, we initialize our spatial audio engine. This is basically responsible for everything audio-related in the Google VR system. Of course, this wouldn't do much without any audio sources, right? So here, we create our audio source, or as we call it, our sound object, with a simple function call. So after the creation, you can manipulate its properties, such as its volume or its position, as seen here. Then, once you are happy with the settings, all left to do is to play the sound at the desired time. So what about the environment then? We work really hard to provide a solution as simple and as intuitive as possible for you to add room effects into your environment. These room effects can be added or modified anytime with a single function call. So as you can see here, all you need to think about is the size and the surface materials of the room you are in. Then our audio system will handle the rest to adapt your audio sources to the environment you've just selected. And that's it. You're all set. So we also provide an audio plugin for the Unity game engine with an even wider set of options to play with. With this plugin, you can create and build your apps to any VR headset you wish to use. So let's take a look. Here, let's say you have this guitar object in your Unity scene, and you want to specialize its sound. So here, all you need to do is to attach Google VR audio source component onto it. Then, with this component, you have all these basic game parameters, such as muting, looping, or changing the volume of the sound. And more interestingly, we provide you these 2 additional properties, directivity and occlusion effects, which can be very useful from the VR point of view. So let's first take a look at how the directivity property works. So the directivity of an audio source can be used to change the way you hear the sound. So imagine you are walking around this guitar in real world. You would hear its emitting sound differently from one way to another. For instance, you would hear it much louder when you're just in front of it than behind, right? So with the directivity property and using these directivity patterns, you can precisely control how this should sound like. So as seen here, you can change the shape of this pattern by using the alpha parameter you can see here to control how it should sound like when approached from different angles all around. And in addition to that, with the sharpness parameter, you can actually adjust smoothly the width of this shape accordingly. And by choosing the right parameters, alpha and sharpness, you can closely match the directivity of real-world objects in your virtual environment. So our guitar object will not usually be alone in the environment, right? So there can be different objects, obstacles, walls to interact or around. To achieve this interaction dynamically, we use our occlusion effects. So for instance, here in this example, the sound of this guitar object should be blocked by the walls when it's out of the view, right? So once you enable occlusion for the guitar, we automatically detect all the physical colliders in the scene, which occlude guitar's path to the listener to apply this effect accordingly. In fact, you can even go further and add more and more obstacles in between to amplify this effect in real time on mobile during gameplay. So to simulate the acoustic environment itself, we use Google VR audio rooms. As you can see here on the right, we have a wide range of parameters to select with to customize the very room you wish to create. So you can use surface materials to determine how the sound waves should get reflected from each wall of your room and how they are affected in different frequencies. Then we provide additional reflectivity and reverb properties to fine-tune this outcome. So here, parameters such as gain and time can be used to adjust the loudness and time of your room sound. Moreover, you can use the brightness parameter to adjust and balance the low and high frequencies, which can be very useful when you want to simulate how empty or how full your room should sound like. For instance, decreasing this value dramatically can be a perfect solution when you want to make your room feel like it's full of furniture. So of course, with all these parameters to select from, it's totally up to your imagination to create your own unique sounding worlds. So you see here are dozens of surface materials for each wall of your room. For instance, you can use surface materials like marble or sheetrock when you want to create more echoic environments, such as caves or cathedrals. On the other hand, you can go for something like heavy curtain when you want to have more damped, dry-sounding environments. And here, one thing worth remembering, again, is all the parameters we've been talking about so far, all those properties, can be updated and manipulated in real time. So as Ian previously mentioned, our audio system will react immediately to every change you make in the environment in real time during gameplay. So to simply put, there are just limitless possibilities in the types of experiences you can go for your audience. And for that, I'm now handing over to Adam, who will be talking more about the user experience side for designing for spatial audio. Thanks.
Thanks, Alper. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm a user experience designer. And over the past year, I've been designing apps for VR for the Daydream team. And during this experience, we've learned a lot of things integrating this plugin. One thing I can say is that it performs extremely well, even against real-world tests. So today I'm going to share some design considerations that we've learned for that. The fundamental building blocks you'll be working with are the audio room, the GVR sound field sources, and the GVR audio sources. So let's take a look at the room model. Room models provide early reflections and reverb and the materials of the walls around you. They make a living room sound like a living room, or outdoor sound like an outdoor scene. It's really easy to make these rooms sound however you want because you have so much control. You can change the materials of the walls and the floor and the ceiling, make the walls transparent, and connect different rooms together to get different sonic sounds from different parts of the room. It's super powerful. It's easy to make a living room sound like a cave, or a cave sound like a living room. So when you're thinking about the ambience of a scene, like the ocean waves in the distance, or swaying trees, or birds, there's two ways that you can make these sounds happen. You've got the GVR sound field sources and the audio sources. The sound field sources play back ambisonic audio files. These are similar to how a 360 photo works or a skybox in your app. You hear sound from all directions from one audio file. Ambisonic sources don't respond to the user moving in a direction like walking, but they do respond to head rotation. So they work really good for sounds that are in the distance, when you need a complex scene with a lot of ambience. For things that do move, use the audio sources. For instance, dropping an audio source on a bird, it just sounds natural, whether it's flying near you or far away. You can also use audio sources as ambient objects. So imagine sprinkling audio sources all around your environment. As the user walks around, they'll hear these sounds go by them, and it'll just feel super natural. So as Julius mentioned earlier, we move our heads to locate sounds. But because users aren't always moving their head, we can do a little trick for them. When there's something out of their field of view that demands attention, that we want them to be able to precisely locate, you can animate the position of that sound. Users don't notice that happening, and when they look at it, you stop animating it, and they instantly locate it. A similar thing that happens is that when you repeat a sound, users are more likely to locate it. In addition, if you have a single sound file that's comprised of many complex elements, it achieves the same effect. Let me give you an example. Imagine you lose your phone at home, and your ringtone is a single sine wave beep. When that ringtone happens, you're probably not going to find your phone. You might even think it was the dishwasher or that you were hearing things all together. But if that beep happens even one more time, you're much more likely to locate it, and you'll know you're not crazy. When you're picking your sounds for your app, there's important sonic characteristics to take in mind if you want users to be able to spatially locate sounds and have them sound more realistic. As Julius mentioned earlier, the occlusion from your head and the ear shape filter the full frequency spectrum of audio. So with this in mind, make sure that your sounds have a broad range of frequencies. Avoid using sounds that are lacking in high frequencies. Avoid really quiet sounds or really simple sounds like a sine wave beep. These simple tones like a sine wave beep are even difficult to spatialize in the real world. Audio sources take mono files, and there's thousands of tools and libraries available to get sound effects for your games and experiences. With ambisonic audio, this is just up and coming. There's not a lot out there right now, but over the next year, expect to see a host of tools and libraries for these. But to get started right now, there's two ways to do this. You can use a plugin like this one from Ambix to take your mono or stereo files and map them to a 3D ambisonic sphere. On that sphere, you can animate the position of sounds so they match what you see visually in the scene. You can add audio effects and then output your mix to a 4-channel ambisonic file. The second way you can do this is by recording your own ambisonic files with a microphone like the Zoom H2N. With these microphones, it's just like a 360-degree camera. You can drop it anywhere in a room, outside, and capture all sound from all directions. Finally, when you get your experiences up and running, it's really important to check your work. Make sure that what you see and what you hear match. It just needs to sound natural. So let me share an example that we stumbled upon. We had an ocean scene that was this low poly ocean that was not moving, and we threw some sound of waves crashing, and it just felt really wrong. So one tip is just look around your scene, see what's moving, and put sounds for things that are moving, or things that are out of view that you would expect to hear. When you're testing your app, if your experience allows users to roam freely, we've seen that users love finding these sound sources and putting their ear right up next to them. So make sure the sounds you're using are really high quality, and that no matter where you are in the experience, the sounds are natural. And when you do check your work, make sure to check on headphones, different types of headphones. These provide the best spatial audio experience. Try not to test your work on laptop speakers or cell phone speakers. So to get started right now, check out the links to the SDK and check out the demo app. It's a fun example of how good this is. We'll also be posting things in the Spaces app, some examples and tutorial videos.